And hello, good afternoon, happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to Get a Grip with Coach Elex. I am your host, Coach Elex, and with me I have the very handsome co-host that it's here with me. I cannot see him, but he's here somewhere, right? Hello.
Just like a spirit. You can't see me, but I'm just hovering right above you on the next floor.
Oh,
This is Stephen the Medium.
isn't that beautiful? So Stephen the Medium, my husband, my better half, and my co-host, um, it's here with me. And at the studio, we have our general manager, Jim, who is producing our show today because Mark, our producer, is still sick at home, and hopefully he's listening. And if you are, Mark, I hope you feel better so that we can get to see you next week. And having said that, Jim, I love having you in my show. I mean, Steven swears that you play favorites here, but just saying, thank you for being here.
It,
Well, you could also say you love my show, and we'll call it a day.
I think Mark. I think Mark is just too attached to me. I think Mark threatens the station that if he's not here, no one else is doing my show. I think that's what it's all about.
I actually agree with you now. So I totally agree with you. So, Mark, I know what the real story is. But having said that, nevertheless. Oh, awesome,
Perfect.
awesome. That's great. Great to have. Great to know. So Stephen, how are you? How has this been for you? Has this week been for you?
It's been a great week, a very, very good week. And I just realized a couple of days ago that this is my 20th anniversary, 20th year that I graduated law school and took the bar in 2001. So that's crazy that it's been 20 years. Just, I don't know where 20 years went. 20 years of being in juvenile court and representing children and having another business with probate, then getting rid of that business to focus on the mediumship piece, but and still having that juvenile piece still with me, which is much smaller. But 20 years, Elix.
20 years. Honestly, when you said that to me earlier, I cannot believe it. It does not seem like 20 years ago. Like you were going through law school and
Well, I remember asking you and telling you that I wanted to start applying to law school. I think that was back in '96, and you were very supportive, and thus the reason why I became an attorney.
yeah, and you were what was it, 17, 18? Yeah, you were really young when you
No,
started
no,
that
I was a
process.
prodigy, Alex. I was 7.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay, just making sure for the record, for those of you who are counting, yeah,
Yeah.
we're still very young and very handsome, but that's awesome. Congratulations. So I'm telling you, this week has been an incredible week, and the one thing that I wanted to share with everyone is the COVID vaccine. It finally opened for people 75 plus, and I and Steven were trying desperately to get my mom on one of the clinics and it was really hard. But thanks to one of our friends, I'd never asked her if I could just say that publicly, so I'm not going to her name. But thanks to one of our friends, she really helped me get my mom on a list. And she's finally scheduled to get her vaccine next Friday, which is really amazing because it gives me a whole lot of peace of mind. So with that said, if you're listening next Friday, I will not be able to do the show live because I'm going to be taking my mom to get her vaccine, and it's at 1:15, and that's something that we do not want to miss for any reason. So thank you to our friend who came to me through Steven, and I could not be any more grateful. So what else is going on, Steven?
Well, here and there. We just, I think I lost some of my extremities running today. And I love the cold, but Alex, that run was cold. I mean,
It was
that
cold.
was really. I mean, usually, we both have masks on, and if there's nobody in sight when we're running, I pull it down to my chin as we're running outside. If you can't see anybody, but obviously, as people, if they're on the path, you pull it up. And today we didn't need to use the mask because there was nobody out there, but we did use the mask because it was freezing and it warmed our faces, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and for those of you who've already know a little bit about Steven, he's a polar. He's like like an Eskimo, a
A
polar
polar
bear.
bear.
Yeah, he loves the cold, and no matter how cold it is, he's just at home. Me, on the other hand, 65 is like frigid. So, if he says he was cold, believe you me, I was probably dying. Could
You
not
should
wait.
you should be on a Spanish soap opera. You exaggerate 65. You really
Well,
should be.
first of all, I am Spanish. I'm from Puerto Rico, so yeah, I own the fact that I'm super dramatic, and
Yes.
and I'm okay with that. And you should be okay with that after 20, going into 28 years. Hello, you
Well,
should be
clearly I
okay
am.
with that. So, anyways, talking about cold exposure, my guest today, he is somebody that has something to say about that. So for those of you who are listening, let me tell you a little bit about David Magone. David he's an amazing guy. Stephen and I are so lucky to know David and know Nicolette, who is his wife to be. Um, Soon, we don't have a date, but I'm expecting an invitation, Stephen, because
Well, there's no question.
yeah, because I'm telling you right now, Nicolette, if you're listening, let me tell you something. If we don't get an invitation, we're crashing that wedding. Just saying. But David and I, I've met him. He was my very, very first yoga instructor, and we got to work together, and then he has become an incredible friend as his, again, wife to be, Nicolette, and he's sort of a little bit of an expert in the area of cold exposure and a few others. But I'm gonna let him, talk to all of you about that. But anyways, let me just give you a little bit about David. So for those of you who are listening, he's a celebrity, okay? So I am super honored that he took the time to be on my show today. He's globally recognized, yoga, a meditation teacher. He's also the founder of the Prana Vayu Yoga and the Good Stress Method, which, by the way, the Good Stress Method, think about that. Good stress. It's like, sounds like an oxymoron, but it's actually it's an incredible, very um, you know, it will provide you with a whole lot of really awesome information what that means, and again, I'll have him talk to you about that. He's been teaching yoga and meditation, student and instructors for over from over 20 countries since 2005, so he's a little bit of an expert in this area. In 2010, David also became one of the very first Western teachers authorized to teach the thousand-year-old practice of, and again, I'm gonna mispronounce this. David, if you're listening, please forgive me, and you can correct me, correct it when you come on. But of Mangalam Yantra Yoga by Harvard University Buddhist chaplain. So again, it tells you a little bit about his background and his level of expertise. He's received many accolades from press. He's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, in Vogue, in Travel and Leisure, uh, NPR Radio, Shape, Self Magazine, and I could go on and on and on and on. He's a little bit of a model. He thinks he looks really good. I think Nicolette thinks he looks really good, and he actually takes some really awesome pictures. So, but all of these, incredible accomplishments aside, David has an amazing story to share with every single one of you. You don't really want to miss this because it's a story about resilience. It's a story about healing, and it's a story about triumph in the face of, in the face of breakdown. And every single person listening will find a takeaway from his story. I guarantee you, there's no question that wherever you are, whatever your life story is, you probably have experienced difficult times. Some of you may have experienced traumatic times. So you want to listen to David, you want to listen to his story, because it really is, I call this show going from, um, what did I call this show? I forgot. Going from, oh my goodness, trauma to triumph. And David really exemplifies what that looks like, what that journey looks like. So, do you have any questions, Stephen, before we take a break and we get this wonderful man on the line?
Well, I don't have any questions. I have statements. I'm really privileged that I was able to meet David through you and to meet his adorable fiancee, Nicolette, who's just, as cute internally as externally. She just is. But David is as soon as I met him the first time we went out to dinner, I could just see his energy, his auras, in such a genuine person, and a person that you can clearly see just wants to raise the energy for the earth, the universe, and I'm impressed, very, very impressed with his experience and what he's doing. I can't wait for him to come on and start talking to everybody and telling everybody what he's doing. It's a great show. David is amazing.
He is amazing, and so you guys have to tune in, stay here. We're about to take a break, and we'll be right back. If you have questions for David, you're always welcome to join us. Just simply call 508-222-1320, and we will be right back. And hello and welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Elex. I am your host, Coach Elex. With me is my co-host, the very handsome.
Steve in the meeting.
That's right. And I am super happy, super honored to welcome the one and only David Magone to the stage. Mr. David.
Guys, how's it going?
It's going awesome, David. How are you?
Hey, David.
I'm good. So I want to be the first to say that if you do film a soap opera, Elix, I am totally on board for that. And you two will be getting the first invite to my wedding. It might be 2025 with COVID, but you're coming.
Well, that is good to know. And
this is recorded.
Yeah, it is recorded. You are on record. And there's nothing worse than two gay guys crashing. Well, actually, nothing worse or nothing better.
No, better.
That two gay guys crashing a wedding. But I'm sure Nicolette will make sure that we get an invite. So David, how the hell are you?
I'm good, man. It's a frosty day here in New England, so I've been enjoying the temperatures out there and doing my best to take advantage of it.
So let me just say, so you're probably shirtless in a bathing suit somewhere in the middle of some lake here in Massachusetts, or have you done that already? Are you planning to do that later on?
Yeah, I'm going to hop in a pond later on today, I believe. I think it's going to be a nice night for us. I'm going to take a dip for sure.
Oh, David, that's amazing. Let me tell people. Let me share with people first how I met with David. How I met David. So David was my very first yoga instructor. I've never ever done yoga in my life. I've always been doing CrossFit for the longest time, and somebody said, you should do yoga. It will help you be more flexible. So I showed up at the studio, and David was one of the very first classes I took, and as awkward and as I didn't know. I've never done any yoga movement. David was just amazing, so kind, so generous, and we sort of developed an awesome relationship. And the rest is history. Well, there's plenty to share in between, but the rest is sort of history. Right, David?
Absolutely, Alex. I'm really thankful for the fact that we were able to connect. And honestly, I had no idea that was one of your earlier class experiences. So you tricked me good, man. I thought you had plenty of experience.
Well, I sort of, I'm a good faker. Let's just put it that way. And I don't like looking bad. So I did. At least I know I looked really good doing yoga. That's for damn sure. But David, let me first start with how did yoga find you? I know I've heard, you credit a humorous incident on an airplane, and I think it's a great story to share.
Yeah, so I grew up in south central Montana in a town called Livingston, and back when I was around 17 years old, my high school band was invited to basically play some music in China. So when we were there, we were traveling all around the airplane from one concert to the other, and I was actually seated next to a Tibetan monk. I didn't really know about monks at that point. I didn't really even know about Buddhism, but he was interesting. He was bald and he had the red robes that you see on TV, and I thought that the guy was fascinating. But he spoke Tibetan and I spoke English, and we really couldn't communicate. But even so, I was sitting right next to him, and I was sort of keeping an eye on what he was doing over the course of the flight. And at some point, the stewardess brought around Coca-Cola for everybody, and she thought that we might want to have some coffee later on, so she dropped off some powdered coffee cream. So sitting there drinking my Coca-Cola, and I heard the monk rip open his packet of creamer, and I looked over, and he dumped it into the Coca-Cola. Now, I didn't know this, but there's some type of chemical reaction that happens when you combine those two things, and it created this little Coca-Cola volcano, and it sprayed everywhere. Now, at the time, I was kind of wondering how he was going to react or what he was going to do about that. And, his response was kind of great. He just started laughing really, really hard, and he kept laughing, and he started crying, and he was laughing so hard. So for me, I thought that was awesome. I know that growing up, when people would make a mistake or something like that, they would sometimes get upset or they would get really embarrassed, but there was none of that with that guy whatsoever. He just seemed really happy and really joyful. I wish to this day that I could have, talked to him a little bit more to find out how he became like that. So I just had to make assumptions, but I assumed that it must have something to do with meditation. So when I got home, I bought some books and I started practicing on my own. In those books, I read that doing yoga practice would make you a better meditator. So I eventually started to do yoga practices as well. And then I loved it so much that I eventually turned it into what's now been a 20-year full-time career.
Wow. Wow, that I can only imagine, a plane is a very small space. So did everyone like get Coca-Cola all over them or just him?
No, it was just him, man. It's just him and me, and I don't know that anybody else really even noticed it happen. But I'm going to tell you, I think what touched me more about that than anything else was the guy's energy. I mean, it was palpable. I mean, you could just feel the joy radiating from him. And, in my memory, I thought that it might have just been him, but a lot of the Tibetan monks that I've met since him have been exactly the same. So I think they're really onto something with what they practice.
Well, that brings me to, my next question, because yoga personifies a connection between body and mind. So I have a couple of questions. Can you first talk about a little bit about that connection? How can your body influence the state of your mind and vice versa? And then what I'm thinking is, with yoga and meditation, are you actually trying to strengthen or are you trying to sever the connection? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Felix. So, body and mind are interrelated. Everything that affects one affects the other. So, for example, if someone sends you a threatening email and you get really upset about it, your breath will start to accelerate, and you will find a correlation between your breath rate and your thinking processes. So, your heart's starting off your chest, you're breathing a lot faster, your mind starts to race, and you start to experience a lot of different emotions. Now, on the other hand, if you're really relaxing, maybe you go for a massage or something like that, and get your mind off of other things, then at some point your breath will start to decelerate, your thoughts will start to slow down, you'll be thinking more peaceful thoughts. So I think that, really there's a distinct connection between what you experience physically and mentally, and it works the other ways as well. Something you experience mentally can absolutely affect physical states in your body. So your question about yoga is really interesting because, in some contexts, in Buddhist practice, and I always speak about Buddhist practice because that's my background and my training, but in some approaches to yoga and meditation, it's primarily mental. So you say concentrate on one single object of contemplation. After a while, your mind gets really calm and your body starts to follow. Now, you can work top down like that, but you can also work bottom up. And in the methodologies that I primarily practice, which are the Tibetan methodologies, the body in a yoga practice is referred to as a yantra, which means machine. So when you do yoga practices from that perspective, you're actually using your body like a machine to create certain states of awareness. And you do that through specific physical postures, different breathing practices, and other things like that to help you wash away your thoughts so you can actually experience the clear light within yourself. So within the context of that practice, I think that the practices really, they really get you to the point where you can fully inhabit your body. And to being able to work through your body's channels, you can actually create these mental states of mind that help you really see on the deepest level the truth of who you really are.
Wow. I'm listening to you. I share with my listeners last week that I've been experiencing a lot of anxiety because I've been experiencing like a very accelerated heart rate, and I couldn't quite tell if the heart rate is giving me anxiety or the anxiety is causing the heart rate acceleration. And listening to you, I'm saying, maybe this is a practice that may help me feel better, both physically and mentally. Let me ask you this, David. If you had to sum up what yoga and meditation have brought to your life in 3 bullets, what would that be?
That's a great question. I think that 1 is peace of mind. 2 is a deeper connection to my body. And 3 is a better understanding of how what my place is in terms of the overall universe. A deeper understanding of my connection to everything else around me.
what would you tell somebody who's listening who, you know, have thought about doing yoga, they're experiencing different levels of stress in their life, have thought about meditation, but they just say, well, I don't know how to, so they dismiss it. What how would you guide them to begin to take on one of the practices?
Well, a couple things. I mean, right now it's sort of a renaissance for online materials. I mean, back in the day before COVID, I think that you would go to a class, and that's optimal. You know, I think that when you meet with somebody in person, there's an in-person transmission that's just hard to replicate online. Even so, there's thousands of different yoga and meditation teachers offering classes online. I myself have classes, and a lot of my colleagues around the world have classes. And it's really easy these days to just hop online to do some simple, gentle yoga practices, and then to really figure out what you resonate with the most directly. Now, even so, I think that when it comes to the accelerated heart rate you're talking about, I mean, like if it's chronic, yeah, it's always good to get those things checked out for sure. But I think a lot of people these days are noticing that their heart is racing because we're experiencing so much stress. I mean, it's a really stressful time. Mm-hmm. And I think that in some ways is a byproduct of sort of being in a very light, basically aspect of the fight or flight response. You know, we have all these environmental threats. Everything's changing around all the time. We don't know what to expect. So our body is primed to fight the threat or to run away from it. And part of that priming is an accelerated heart rate. So one thing that you'll note is that there is a correlation between your breathing and your heart rate. And you can actually test this out for yourself. You can go to CVS and pick up something called a pulse oximeter. It's this little basically thing that you put on the end of your fingertip, and it measures oxygen levels as well as heart rate. Now, you'll notice that in general, if you elongate your exhale, your heartbeat will immediately start to slow down. On the other hand, if you start to elongate your inhale, your heart rate will start to speed up. So you can sort of hack into your nervous system via your breath by making your exhale longer than your inhale. So I think one of the easiest things that people start with is they practice breathing out to a count of 8 seconds, and then they take a breath in for 4. And if you do that regularly, after a few breaths, it'll start to decelerate your heart rate. And in those moments when you're really stressed out, you can use it as a sort of coping mechanism to decrease some of the stress. It doesn't cure it, but it absolutely takes off the edge by changing your physiological response to stress.
Well, I love that, David, because you're giving us a very tangible practice. So for those of you listening, you know, this is a very tangible way to change your breathing pattern. I know, David, we have to take a break. When we come back, I know Stephen has a couple of questions for you, and I know that I want to talk about, you know, the trauma that you suffer as a young boy, and you know, and how that trauma led you to where you are today. So, but let's take a break first, and when we come back, we'll dive into some questions and we'll dive into that story, and we'll be right back.
Sounds great.
And hello and welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Helix. I am your coach. I am your coach. I am your host, Coach Helix. Pun intended there. And with me is my co-host and better half, Stephen the Medium. And Stephen, I know you have some questions for David. For those of you listening, we have David Magone, the extraordinary David Magone, talking about his story of going from trauma to triumph. So you have some questions for David.
David, I said to Elix on break that I would text him to make sure he remembered when we needed the breaks. And Elix, throw that out the window because I'm so engrossed in this conversation and listening to you, David. I'm not even paying attention to the times, but that's beside the point. But David, one of the things that you I mean, I think this whole experience, I had never heard the story about you being on the plane, the fact that you got that seat where you did, that you were open and available for that opportunity. It blows my mind. And I think the third item when Elix asked about what you've learned and you just, your place in this universe, it's just, I had chills through my body when you said that because it's so profound that, most people just don't think that way and never get to that place, of just even, asking that question or feeling where do I fit in with the world, with the universe. But my question is, being a medium and speaking to dead people all the time, how did this either strengthen or your connection, or is it the same with your spirituality, this whole journey?
I think, Stephen, it's really strengthened my spirituality, and I think that, as part of being a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner, I'm required to take certain religious vows, and I'm required to do certain daily practices. So I think coming back to those practices over and over again just helps to reinforce my spirituality on a day-to-day basis. But I think that more importantly, aside from the rituals and the practices, I think some of the things that the practices help you see in your meditation just really has helped to deeply connect, to help me connect to myself, to connect to other people in my life, and to really start to realize some of the ways in which my mental outlook affects the reality that I see. So I think in some ways, whereas maybe spirituality for me was divorced from reality before, now spirituality is really part of my everyday, where I really see the ultimate essence of life everywhere I look, rather than just in those times when I go to a temple or some particular service. So I think it's really been all encompassing.
Wow, that's amazing, David. Thank you.
That is amazing. And David, I know that when you were young, you suffered from a terrible trauma that led to your suffering from an undiagnosed PTSD for quite some time. And in fact, it was that story what led us to get to work together and expand our relationship. And can you talk a little bit about that incident?
For sure. So, I mentioned that I grew up in south central Montana, and it was a town fairly close to the mouth of Yellowstone Park. It was about 50 miles away. My family and I used to go up there in the wintertime to ride snow machines around, and one of my close friends, Luke, had never done it before, and he asked if we could go. So I petitioned my parents, and they were in agreement, so we decided to pack up our two families and go on a trip to the park. Now, we had all been up there many times together in the summertime, and one of Luke's favorite hikes and my favorite hikes was this really beautiful view in the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. If you've ever seen a picture of Yellowstone Park, it's most likely that you've seen this particular waterfall. It's the one that's featured in all of the different images with a huge canyon and a massive waterfall pouring over. So there's this outlook at the top of it, and we've gone to it in the summer many times, and it was just epic and amazing because you could just watch the water spill over, and it was so powerful. So when we got up to that area, we all decided we wanted to walk down and see it. So, it was the middle of the winter time. It was really frigidly cold out, but we were all used to the elements. And we started walking down the trail, and our boots are breaking through the crust of the snow. And I remember at some point walking through like ankle or shin deep snow to get down there. But we progressed on the trail, and my friend Luke and his brother David, they were always a little bit wild. So they were running like 2 or 3 switchbacks ahead. Out there, basically, when you have a steeply graded slope, they zigzag the trail back and forth to make it easier to walk. So they were like 2 to 3 zigzags ahead, and I'd always been a pretty good kid, so I was just paying attention to my mom, and I was about halfway between them and her. But anyway, as we walked down, my friends Luke and Dave had basically passed out of view, and they were down there for a little while, and then I heard screaming. And at first I thought, I must be hearing things incorrectly, and I kind of ignored it, but then it became louder, and my friend's mom and my mom started to get worried, so I ran down the trail. And when I got to the end of it, I saw my friend Luke standing up on a big snowdrift, and he was just screaming as his brother had fallen off the edge. I was totally freaked out. I knew his little brother David really well. He was, I think, probably 10 years old at that point, and it was just a punch to the gut. So my mom came down, and she had my brother and sister who were younger than me to take care of. My friend's mother was clearly freaking out, and she was trying to figure out how to save her kid, and I was really the one that was best positioned to go for help. So my mom told me to run back up the trail, and the trail itself, I think, was 3/4 of a mile up a steep, snowy slope. And I just started running without hesitation. But I was 12, so I didn't really think about pacing myself, so I just ran as fast as I could. Now, I remember what happened is I got about, probably a quarter of the way up the trail, and because I've been running so fast, I was tired. I mean, it was so hard to run in that snow. And I just decided to stop for a few moments to catch my breath. And it was the craziest thing ever, Felix. When I stopped, I all of a sudden instantaneously felt like nothing was wrong. I sat there, and some part of my mind was saying, David, you have to keep running. But another part of my mind was reviewing homework assignments. I was thinking about the cute girls in my 7th grade class, and basically everything aside from the accident. I don't really know how long I sat there, but, I sat, and I know that my heartbeat started to normalize, and I started to feel pretty normal, so I think it was a while. And my mom came up, and she looked at me sitting there, and she's like, David, what are you doing? Get up and get going. So that kind of shocked me back into it. I got up, and I completed the run to the top of the trail, and by that point, I was so weak I couldn't start the snowmobile up because it had one of those old pulley contraptions you had to pull on. So some nice people helped me out, and, I rode to get help. I talked to the park rangers, and by that point, it was too late. My partner was dead, or my friend was dead. So I think that, obviously the trauma of losing a friend is horrible, but I think what really messed me up in that situation is my perceived failure. When I sat down on that trail like that and I just gave up for a little while, I didn't know anything about disassociation or how people respond to traumatic events, but I thought that I was a really messed up person. So, before that point, I had always had lots of, pretty good friends. They were, popular kids and kids who did well in school. But I just didn't relate with them anymore. So I, in essence, just exploded my life. I gradually pushed away my good friends. I started to hang out with kids who were a little rough around the edges. And in fact, I think 4 of those kids eventually went to prison later on down the road. When I was older, I started to experiment with drugs and alcohol to just sort of numb the pain that I was experiencing from that event. My grades plummeted. I had flashbacks all the time. I had a really hard time connecting to other people, so it really screwed me up. I think really the essence of it was just that moment where just for a second, I paused for just long enough, and it was a little bit too long, and I was just really never able to forgive myself for that, and that trauma really followed me like a shadow for years.
And imagine, how old were you at the time?
I was around 12 years old.
So imagine, as a 12-year-old, you suffered you had that significant moment. And at that age, you decided you were something. What was that something?
Just a bad person. I just thought that on the deepest core level, I was a horrible person.
So you decided you were a horrible person. How did that incident, David, get in the way of life for you? Because on one hand, you also, you've had a pretty successful life, right? So we can't argue that significant moments are all that bad, but on the other hand, we could also argue that decision, whatever it is that you decided about yourself, I'm a bad person, became a lid for yourself for moving forward.
So I think it affected me pretty profoundly. I mean, I've always been a pretty driven person, and I absolutely love what I do, so I've been able to be fairly successful. But, I think that really things came to a head later on. So I had all those struggles in high school, and they followed me to some degree in my 20s, and I kind of got things under control when I was in my 20s and 30s, and the yoga community and some of my mentors really helped me out with that. But I think that a lot of the unresolved stuff was just still sitting there. And honestly, right around 40 years old, my life just totally fell apart. I went through a divorce with my ex-wife of 17 years. You mentioned that I had trained people in over 20 countries, so I had established this really vibrant community of people who were helping other people out. But really, on the deepest level, whenever they would say something nice about me or say that I was helping people or doing a good job, I would immediately think, oh my God, if you really knew who I was, you would never say that. And I think because I felt that really deeply, and I felt that sort of dissonance between the way they saw me and the way I saw myself, I just gradually pushed people away until everything crumbled. I trained those 20 teachers, but at some point I lost contact with pretty much every single one of them because I pushed them away. I think my inability to really connect to my emotions and to connect to myself, played a huge part in pushing my ex-wife away. And I was just left holding a handful of empty accomplishments with nobody around me to celebrate them with.
And I guarantee you, every single person who's listening can relate to your story, David. I'm on edge, and like Steven said, I'm forgetting that we need to take a break. Let's take another break, and when we'll be right back, we'll pick up exactly what we are so that you can tell people what do you have to do to conquer that experience about yourself so that you could get to the other side and have the success that you have today. So we'll be right back, and if you want to call 508-222-1320. And hello, good afternoon. Welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Helix. We are talking to internationally known David Magone, yoga and meditation teacher, master, and we're talking about David and his traumatic experience as a young boy. David, I'm going to say time has flown by, and I am going to right now claim that we need part two of this because we just barely touched the surface. So, I'm hoping that you will be willing to come back really soon so that we could talk some more. But in the interim, I do have a couple of questions. What did you have to do to complete this experience, to turn this experience into something that would lead you to the kind of work that you're doing today? In particular, I want you to talk about, the cold exposure that, that you're doing, your good stress method. How did that experience lead you to this?
So I did a number of things, Felix, and you obviously were a huge part of that. So I would love to talk about your role another time. I think that one of the things that I really did to overcome some of the trauma was exposure therapy, and I didn't really think of it as such, but I remember after you and I had been doing some work together, I was ready to sort of tackle the problem. And so I went back to that spot on the park. And I previously had not even been able to look at that place. But when I went back, I did the hike down to the waterfall with my fiancée, Nikki. And we got down there, and I was looking over the edge, and I started to just realize that nobody could have survived that fall. So I started to make peace with it then, and Nikki said, David, you should complete it. You should run that run. And I was like, all right, yeah, you're totally right. So I did, and mind you, I'm a 225-pound, heavily tattooed man. I just shaved my head at that time, and there were hundreds of tourists around. So I looked like a psychotic person running up the trail. But I tried to run as fast as I could up to the trail, and I got back to around the same point that I stopped, and I realized that a little 12-year-old couldn't have done any better. And I literally just fell to my knees, and I started crying. And, Nikki was so amazing because she just stood over me like a protective umbrella, and she shielded me from all the onlookers there. And, I just cried out 20 years of tears. And I think that element was so helpful to actually go back to repeat with my body what I experienced in that moment, and then to process the emotions. For me, that was insanely healing. Mm-hmm. Now, the other thing that I did that's related to the cold acclimation is that I used to have pretty severe flashbacks whenever I would see ice water. So if I went to a frozen stream or something like that, I would flash back, I would start to accelerate my breath, my heartbeat would race, and I just want to run away. So I started the cold acclimation as a part of cross-training for my Tibetan practices. We do this practice called inner fire meditation where you raise your body's heat so you can deal with cold better. And as part of that, we are oftentimes encouraged to meditate outside, but I was always a little scared to do it, and, I've been practicing inside. So I heard this guy on YouTube. His name is Wim Hof. He's famous for doing long-term ice baths and things like that, and he said, what I can do, anybody can do. So that kind of piqued my interest, and I started to look into some of his cold acclimation techniques. I practiced them myself, and at some point I was introduced to the practice of cold water bathing. Bathing in cold water is helpful because if you're able to withstand, say, 10 minutes in cold water, then walking around on a day like today where it's 19 or 20 degrees is not that hard because the water strips heat away from your body faster. So I kept going back, and, I noticed that a lot of the depression and the anxiety that I'd experienced in the past would immediately go away when I entered the ice water, and those side effects usually lasted for hours, if not days. But the most amazing thing that happened was that my flashbacks went away. Now when I go to the ice water, no matter where it is, I see it as exciting. I see the water, I wonder what it might be like to get into it. I feel its power and I feel its energy. But unless I really dredge up those memories, they're not there anymore. So I think that the cold water exposure really helped with a lot of my depression and anxiety, but it also really helped with my flashbacks.
Wow. I will say, David, it's like I have you with me because Stephen earlier at the top of the hour shared how we went running today, and it's one of the coldest days, to be running. And I have several layers, but I was frigid. But I think of you when I'm in that state, and I try to calm my mind down and think of ways to get my body warm. And again, I haven't done your training. I'm looking forward to doing your training, after, we all get vaccinated. But I do believe that this is something that actually works. And let me also say that even without trauma, many people suffer from maladaptive responses to stress, and that can lead to high blood pressure, poor emotional regulation problems, digestion, sexual dysfunction. What would you say are some of the red flags somebody listening, may have and should pay attention to? How would someone know if they're suffering from, an overactive nervous system?
Well, that's one thing we do with the good stress method is, I don't think that I realized before I started to go into the ice and later on, once I started to experiment with fire, I don't think I realized how often I was in fight or flight mode. So what we oftentimes do is we show people how to determine whether or not they're in fight or flight or rest and digest. And so one of the things we do is we teach them how to walk on broken glass in a really safe way. That basically, it raises the heartbeat, it accelerates the breath, and in that moment, people can really feel what a genuine fight or flight response is like. Once they get used to that, then we up the ante a little bit, and we show them how to walk on 1,200-degree coals, or we show them how to ice plunge for 2.5 minutes. And all of those different exercises help people to identify some of the key signals that their nervous system has been triggered toward fight or flight. Now, namely, even without those tools, what you can keep an eye on is your breath rates. if you're taking more than 16 to 18 breaths per minute, it generally indicates that you're tipping toward fight or flight mode. And if you're taking fewer than 12 breaths per minute, it generally indicates you're tipping toward rest and digest mode. So I think that what's happening in the breath is really one of the best indicators for what's happening in the nervous system, and it really helps to show whether you're toggling toward fight or flight or rest and digest.
Well, again, a very tangible way to learn how to take that practice on. Stephen, do you have any questions for David before we close our show for today?
No, I just really hope, David, that you come back.
I would love to come back, guys, and I really appreciate you having me for today, and as well as your role in my personal healing, because we didn't talk about it, but you two have played a huge role.
No, we're gonna talk about it. You have to come back because we really just scratched the surface. There's many more things I want to talk to you about. Let me just ask you this. I know you do healing workshops. I know you're currently doing online yoga classes. What are you doing? What's available, and where can people find you, David?
So right now, we've primarily been building out my website, which is davidmcgowan.com. We have online yoga videos. We do one live practice per week, and I film additional content around meditation, gentle yoga practices, and faster, more athletic yoga practices. And then separately, this coming fall, it's a universe allowing, once COVID passes, we're going to be doing some live in-person events where we teach people how to work with their nervous system through a combination of yoga, breathing, forest walking, and then other modalities like fire walking and ice plunges that can help people determine when they're in fight or flight mode. And those exercises, the yoga and breathing and forest walking, will show them how to mitigate that so they can bump back toward more healthy states of being.
Well, I don't know about Stephen, but I assure you I'm going to be one of those in one of those programs because I cannot wait. I'm looking forward to it. And I miss you. You know, I used to see you every week consistently, and we haven't seen each other for quite some time. Before we close, David, I'm going to, this is my rapid fire question, and we're going to take 1 minute. So I'm going to ask you a question, and you're just going to give me the answer that comes to mind. No thinking, just the first answer that comes to mind. And so you're ready?
Go for it.
All right. What's your idea of perfect happiness?
Perfect happiness is a day in the forest for me. That's it.
Beautiful. What's your greatest fear?
My greatest fear is not feeling truly alive.
What's your current state of mind?
Agitated and resolved.
Love that. Which talent would you most like to have?
The talent to heal other people.
And what do you consider your greatest achievement?
My greatest achievement is returning to the ability to feel.
What's your most treasured possession?
I received a silk cloth from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He's sort of my pope, so that was a big deal.
And who are your heroes in real life?
The Dalai Lama is one of my great heroes. The Zen Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh is another one of my biggest heroes.
And what's your motto?
My motto? Staying alive.
Love it. You passed with flying colors. The only thing, Stephen, I'm a little disappointed that I was not included in his heroes, real life heroes, but I'll take some time to deal with that, you know. But with that said, David, you are amazing. I know that people who listen to today got a whole lot of value from listening, and I'm gonna be in touch with you because we're gonna get you back here sooner than later so that we can continue this conversation because you have a whole lot more to say. So with that said, thank you for joining us today, David.
Thank you for having me, Alex. I miss you both, and I look forward to the next time.
Thank you, David.
And with that said, Mr. Stephen, I think we are at the end of the hour. Anything you want to say about that? That was amazing. I was on my edge.
It was. Yeah, it was. That he is. I knew what he was going to bring to the table is just like I said before, Elix. It's just so authentic and so genuine, and just the number of years he's been here, you know, on this earth, what he's learned, how he's adjusted. I mean, it's remarkable what this guy has done. And you know, and I meant to say this too at the beginning. And one of the most amazing things too, Elix, he's just such a nice guy. He's just so nice.
He is what I call a good human, a good human. So, Stephen, anything you want to share with our listeners before we say goodbye?
Well, I like scrambled eggs with cheese, and
And where can
no,
they
you can
connect with you? Hello.
Stephen the Medium. That's where you find me, and check out on my Facebook page or website or Instagram my clip last week from WJAR News.
Fabulous. And are there going to be any more bottles out there for people to find?
Sure, there's still one on the canal that I posted, which I'm shocked is still there, and just be looking forward to some information on some more coming out.
And for me, guys, I am doing a beginning of the year promo. I'm choosing 10 people to work one-on-one at a discounted rate. So you can learn more about that at Coach Elix. At Coach Elix, you can find me at Coach Elix anything. And if you need any more information, just simply send me a text, email, or just call me. And that's it. That's it for today. Jim, thank you so much for doing our show. Mark, I hope you get better. And for all of you listening, have a fabulous weekend and a fabulous rest of your week.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.